Hello, everybody, and welcome again to Montgomery County Water Level. I'm Jim Spigener, your host, and today we're gonna talk about something that's pretty current, I believe, and pretty important, and it's going to become more and more important, I think, as time goes on. We're going to spend a little bit of time talking about drought, its impact on the county, and how different organizations, water providers, and entities, how they deal with that. And I got my guest here today, Jonathon Smith from Porter Sud, one of the probably more responsible, somebody we've really found that to be, I think, on top of it. And Porter Sud has generously stepped up to help Lone Star. I'm not, by the way, little disclaimer, I'm not talking as the president of the board, but I do know that Porter Sud has stepped up to help Lone Star with the subsidence study, which is going to be really important, I think, to the county.
Correct.
Going forward. So we're going to talk today about drought. We just, as of today, got the new drought map out, and the new drought map shows that over half, or about half, of Montgomery County is in the worst stage of drought. And so I saw that map before I left home this morning, and I know that Lone Star's already passed the resolution, and so we automatically go to a higher allocation of water, and we'll talk about why that's the case as we walk through that. But before I go any further, I would like to introduce Jonathon and get Jonathon to talk a little bit about himself. I've had a chance to talk to him. I know that he's a native Texan guy, and you can just look at him and tell he was a football player. And he did a little short stint off to Colorado and realized the error of his ways, and he came back. So I'm gonna let Jonathon introduce himself. He's the general manager at Porter Sud, and I've found to be a great guy to work with, and a person who takes all this water stuff very seriously. So Jonathon, give us a little bit of who Jonathon Smith is.
Well, I did play football, but it was six-man football at Richland Springs. So I was born in Brownwood, Texas, and I've been in the water and wastewater industry since 2001. And we wound up moving to Colorado in 2012. Beautiful, first time I'd ever seen the mountains. And we came back in 2019 and loved being in Texas, loved being in South Texas.
Yep.
Until this last summer, it got pretty hot, and
made you want to go back, right?
I was missing some of those mountain days. But no, absolutely love it down here, and it's a privilege for Porter Sud to partner up with Lone Star, because the problems that we face like this cannot be solved by one entity.
That's right.
It takes a bunch of us together with different ideas and different perspectives, and we're going to have to implement different plans.
You bet.
Along the way. So thanks for having me on.
Appreciate it. So, drought is an interesting thing. I never really thought much about it. I just turn my water on, and I've got water. It doesn't matter whether there's a drought or not. And one of the things I never thought about was how much more demand is put on the system when we're in drought conditions. And one of the things that I found out was during the 2011 drought, which was a horrible drought. I was living in Magnolia, and I had my own well. So I had a 2-acre lot, and I had a well that I had 290 sprinkler heads on my 2 acres. And, I just turned it on, and it would take 22 hours to run through a cycle. It shut off for 2 hours, and come back on and run 22 hours more. And my yard was beautiful and green, and it just didn't occur to me, I didn't have to even follow the neighborhood. The neighborhood had a drought plan. It said you're going to only water on certain days because everybody else was on the neighborhood water system. I wasn't. I had my own well, so I just let it run. And then I got to looking at the water consumption in the county. And in 2011, which is the worst drought, we lost probably 30% of all the trees in the woods. It was so bad. And you're starting to see that now. The water usage went up so the per capita water usage was somewhere in the neighborhood, which shocks me, of about 100 gallons per day per person. Now think about that. That's two big 55-gallon barrels full of water.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm a big old boy, but I can't drink that much. And you know, I think to myself, if I'm in the shower for 10 minutes, and it takes me about 10 minutes to wash all of me, I think to myself, there's probably wouldn't be that much water in the bottom of that barrel. Really, I mean, you know, my shower doesn't. I've got one of these flow limiters on it. It doesn't. And I think to myself, how could somebody use 100 gallons of water? Well, during the 2011 drought, that number went to 180 gallons per day. Just in 2011, and then 2012, it dropped back.
Yeah.
So it occurred to me that, you know, during drought conditions, I always thought we'd use less water, but we actually use more water. And and so it's an interesting phenomenon. And then I got to thinking about, well, how does a water company, and I'm going to let you talk a little bit about Porter Sud or an entity like Porter Sud, how do they manage? So let me give you a couple of things that I never thought about. And that is that everybody applies for permits, and you permit however much water you say you're going to pump. And if you over pump that permit, there are penalties for that. Not only do you have to pay for the excess water you pump, the penalty can be pretty staggeringly big. And so in a drought, when people are trying to keep their yards alive or whatever they're doing, how does some of these water companies and some of these other people keep from over pumping and paying these penalties, which I understand in a lot of cases they can't pass along to their customers because they're penalties. They're not some kind of surcharge or something like that. And it really brought home to me the need for drought planning and that kind of stuff. So I'm going to let you talk just a little bit, Jonathon, about Porter Sud, and how do you guys think about that? How do you think about drought? Do you worry about the over pumpage and how you're going to keep that from occurring? And what kind of drought plans do you guys, just talk a little bit about Porter Sud and how all that works?
Well, I think it's important to plan. I think planning is vital. Yep. But I think it was Mike Tyson that says that everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face.
Amen.
And this summer we got punched in the face pretty good. And so part of what we do is we try to think beyond the here and now and beyond the next 5 to 10 years. Like whenever we think about our water capacities and our pumping capacities, and the amount of water we're able to actually pull out of the ground, I'm thinking 30 to 40 years in the future.
Right.
And so when it comes to us being concerned about overpumping, we're not concerned in the fact that we're going to overpump and then be fined by Lone Star because we have the water available.
Right.
Because it's part of our planning. Like we've planned to have so much demand in the next 5 years. And this past 2022, I mean, we broke 1 billion gallons pumped. Wow. And so
that's hard to get your head around.
1 billion gallons pumped. And, you know, Montgomery County is a great place to live. Yep. A great place to live. And, I mean, everybody's moving to Montgomery County. And so one of the problems that has for the utilities is providing enough water. And so it definitely takes a lot of future thinking and vision because nothing happens quick. We're currently looking to add an elevated storage tank that's going to add an additional 750,000 gallons. That's a 2-year project. If I need that in 6 months, it's just not possible.
Right.
So we have to be years ahead of the demand. Otherwise, you're behind the 8 ball.
So do you guys, I think that's great. I wish more people would think 5 years, 10 years, 20 years out. So how do you guys plan for drought?
We don't really plan for drought. What we have is we plan for a thing that we call like our peak max day demand. The average usage goes up. For instance, in August, our average demand was about 4.5 million is what we pumped.
A day?
That's per day. So that's quite a bit.
Yep. And
Right.
then in the winter that goes down some?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. In the winter we're back down in the 2s.
Okay, that's mainly because of irrigation, I guess,
yeah.
and outdoor sports and
Yeah.
swimming pools and
And it's hot, so people are consuming more water
Right,
and
right,
things
right,
like that. And so one of the things, it's really hard to plan for droughts, especially in Texas. I mean, we're feast or famine.
yeah.
During the feast moments, we have way too much rain, and it shows us exactly how bad our drainage system really is. And then we have famines, and it shows us how important and how scarce our water is. There never is a fine line between the two. And so we cannot plan for droughts. One of the things, though, that we started doing this year is actually started pushing more on the education of conservation, because as a customer, like, I want you to use the water. Absolutely. Like, use the water, but let's use it efficiently.
Yeah.
Like, let's don't get it on the sidewalk. Let's don't, water the road, because I don't care how much water you add, it's not going to grow.
That's right.
Like, if you have a toilet, check your toilets regularly to make sure they don't have leaks. Like, we provide resources and supplies to help our customers.
It's amazing to me how much water. I had a leaking toilet years ago when I lived in California, and didn't realize it was an upstairs bedroom and just me and my wife, and we never went up there. And I got a water bill one day, and in fact, they fined me for the next year because my water usage was so high because of this little bitty. I went up there, and sure, it was just a little dribble. But it was dribbling 24/7.
Yep. And, that's some of the stuff, whenever a customer gets a high water bill, they call in and they're upset. And, understandably so. They're used to a $30 bill, and now they have a $100 bill. Why?
Yeah.
They've got questions. And so they call, and, we can pull up their account and actually see per hour what their usage is.
And help them figure out.
And help them, being like, hey, I'm seeing usage, because you really don't see usage at 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And so those are kind of the hours that we should see zeros.
But when that meter's spinning at 1 in the morning, there's something wrong.
And so, we'll give them a diatab to put in the toilet and explain how to use it, and they'll, see whether or not they have a toilet leak. So using the water efficiently, I think, is one of the best things that we can do. And, at some point, kind of like I'm drinking this, bottle of water, at some point the water's going to be gone. Like, I don't know if that's 20 years, 50 years, 100 years, 200 years, but at some point the water's going to be gone. And if the withdrawal rate is actually greater than the, water actually making it down to the aquifer, we're not going to have water. So at some point we're going to have to change the way we think about what our yards should look like.
Yeah.
And start moving more towards xeriscape versus lush green St. Augustine grass.
Yeah, St. Augustine's not an efficient use of water.
No.
I know in California they've really spent a lot of, before I left there, they spent a lot of time. There was a lot of money spent, investment spent finding grasses that used a whole lot less water.
And I think that'd be really good too.
Well, you and I were talking out in the lobby before we started the show, and just an interesting fact. It's maybe not a big critical thing, but you were talking about grass and water, and how if you overwater, what happens to the grass. Talk a little bit about that. I thought that was extremely interesting.
So one of the water conservation tips that we gave earlier in the summer was, just talking about grass, and it's very lazy and really stupid. And so if you overwater the grass, then the roots will never dive deep the way that they should to actually establish the grass and, get some of the water that locked in that moisture barrier down below. And so the more you water it, the
lazier it gets.
The lazier it gets. And so by, cutting back the watering and getting it to where, maybe it's a tinge yellow, the roots are actually growing,
reaching down.
Then you can water it a little bit more. But I mean, if you're watering
it's a much more efficient use.
Oh, absolutely. Because then you go from watering every day to maybe now you're only watering 2 days a week because that's all you need.
Right. Another thing that and this is not part of the big picture, but it is in a certain way. We finally got rain. I forgot what day it was, but we got a heck of a rain. I live up in Willis, and it actually rearranged all my furniture on my deck. I live on the lake, and but we got about a half an inch of rain in probably an hour, hour and a half maybe. So for right now, that was but I had to go out before it stopped raining, and I got in my truck and I had to go pick up a prescription. And I'm driving down through the neighborhood, and it's raining, and people's sprinklers are running.
Yeah.
And it occurred to me that a couple of things. One, either their rain, a lot of sprinkler systems, mine does, has a rain indicator on it. So when it rains, I think it turns the sprinkler off.
Yeah, it'll skip the next
It skips the
watering
next-
cycle.
And if it's raining and your sprinkler's on, mine turns it off. And it occurred to me that a lot of people may have these and they're not working anymore. I mean, you can't you got to keep those maintained too.
You do.
And it just amazed me that it was raining. And I was thinking to myself, I can turn my sprinkler off for a couple of days now. And I looked, and people's sprinklers were on while it was raining. So I think this education issue is you know, if you think about the cost to go out and obtain new water sources, and then you think about the cost of learning to conserve,
Oh yeah.
it just doesn't make any sense for us not to do a better job of that. I mean, and it really gets down to awareness, because this stuff's not exciting.
No.
So you and I talking here, there are some people who will turn this on tonight to go to sleep,
Yeah.
right? I get that, but it's exciting to me in a certain way to recognize that Montgomery County's growth is going to be dependent, I believe, in the end, on whether we can furnish enough water for everyone here, to grow. Because without water, you're not going to have a neighborhood. Period.
No.
I can get by for a while without eating. I can't get by very long at all without drinking. And so there's more and more holes being stuck in the ground. All you got to do is drive around Montgomery County and look at the growth of the population. It is unbelievable. And we have a lot of water. There's no doubt about it. But it's not how much you have. It's how much can you get without impinging on each other.
And some of that too is just because we have enough water now doesn't mean that water's all my water
Yeah.
to be used right now for my own benefit. Like we need to be thinking about what water's there for our kids. What water's there for our grandchildren. Like it's not just mine.
Right. I mean, we're fortunate in South Texas, along the Gulf Coast. We have a lot of water.
Yeah.
Compared to West Texas and places like that, we have an abundance of water.
Yeah.
But what you're going to see is that lack of water out there. I mean, look at the population out there compared to the population here. And so I think we're going to need every bit. We're going to need every water source we can get our hands on before this is all over.
And I think water conservation is going to play a big part in just making the customers aware that, there's ways that you can cut back on your watering. And like you said, the water and wastewater industry is completely forgotten about until you turn on the tap and no water comes out, or you flush the toilet and it doesn't go down.
Right.
And then all of a sudden,
it becomes real poor.
They remember the phone number.
Yeah. I have a lift station 2 doors down from my house, and the guy who lives right beside it came over and banged on my door. I'm part of the architectural control committee, which means it doesn't matter what the neighborhood problem is. They're knocking on my door. Anyway, he came and knocked on my door and said, "The lift station's running over." And so I went and looked, and sure enough, it was. It had quit pumping for some reason, and that got people outside.
Yep.
I mean, it was an emergency. So I totally agree. And the other thing is, we're getting better, I believe, or we will be getting better. I know some communities are really good at using their wastewater. So there's starting to be a lot of irrigation done, like on golf courses and places like that, with what they call gray water.
Yep.
And it's water that you couldn't drink, but rather than treat it and dump it in a river somewhere, they're actually putting it on the golf course rather than taking new groundwater out of the ground to water their golf courses. So I'm hearing about a lot more of those kinds of projects and all of that. Now, how do you guys impose any regulations during drought? What do y'all do? Tell me how y'all approach
we
it.
do have a drought contingency plan as part of our water conservation plan. And with that, we do have stages of restrictions. And we're currently in stage 2 of our water restriction. So if you're an odd number, you water on odd days. If
Your
you're
address?
an even number,
Okay.
you water on an even day, and no water in between 8 to 5 because of the higher evaporation rates.
Right.
We're going back to the efficiency aspect. So, and we have all the way up to stage 4, and stage 4 is no watering. And when we get to stage 4, like, I really don't care about your grass. Like, I want to be sure that whenever
Right.
you turn on the faucet,
You get a drink of water.
you get the water you need.
Yeah. Or even more important, when the fire department pulls
Yes,
up, hooks up to
because that's
your
one of
house.
the aspects that we have to be able to do is
Yeah,
meet
pressure.
all the customers' demands. Plus, if a fire
Right.
happens, or we
Right.
have a water main break.
So we know you can educate people, and people do respond. I mean,
Yeah.
I in looking at the per capita water use per day, I can see that it's very, very steady, and actually dropped down before 2011, and then jumped. Of course, 2011 was an eye opener. 180 gallons per day per person from 100.
Yeah.
That's a pretty significant jump. But also, up until like 2 years ago, the water use in Montgomery County per capita had sort of been trailing down. Part of that was the surface water. Plant came online in 16, and people started getting the surface water, so that took away from some of the groundwater pumping. But that's over. The population has overshadowed that, and we're now going back up. What's the average use in y'all's surface area per day?
So right now we're about 92. At the end of 2022, we were 92 gallons per person per day.
And so that's across the whole year.
Yep.
Correct?
Yep. Across the whole year.
And so in the summer it's probably 120, and it may be
Yeah,
80
probably
or 75 in the winter. Are y'all seeing a pretty big spike as of this because of this? I mean, I know you see a spike in the summer, but is the
Oh yeah. So from July, we pumped about 118 million gallons in July, and in August we pumped 142 million gallons.
wow.
So we went up 20% from July to August this year.
And what do you think August now is going to show?
I think it's going to step down.
Do you?
Yeah.
So you think the little bit of rain we've had, and then the
Yeah.
cooling a little bit,
And
had
the education and implementing stage
Right.
2 water restrictions.
now,
and
are
things like
stage
that.
2, when y'all implement these water restrictions, are they mandatory or voluntary?
Stage 2 is mandatory. So stage 1 is a voluntary. Stage 2 is mandatory. So if there's customers that choose to not comply with the water restrictions,
What do y'all
there's
do?
the first time we notify them, let them know like, hey, we're in stage
It's
2
an
water
even day,
restrictions.
You're not supposed to be watering today.
Yeah, because some people just don't know.
Don't know.
Like they don't
Yeah,
know. And so the first one's just kind of a written warning type thing. The second time, after we've talked to them and it's documented, it's 20% of their last previous bill is a fine. And then the third time, it's 30%. And then after that, they're subject to having a flow restrictor put in to their water meter, so it reduces the flow that they can actually take.
So it mandatorily
Yeah.
restricts them.
Yeah.
And how do y'all find out about? Do y'all get out and look, or how do
Well,
you-
we have staff that are out and about checking plants and fixing
Right.
leaks, and so if they see
Yeah.
something, they'll mention it. Like I saw someone that was watering. It was 9/11, and they were watering outside in the morning at 9/11 in the morning, and I was like, well, that's not really when you should be watering.
That's
So
right.
we reached out to them and let them know, like, hey.
y'all staff does? Y'all have a way to
Yeah,
do that?
yeah.
You do that by mail mostly? Or?
So we do it by U.S. mail. We actually make phone calls. We email. Can do all that type of stuff as well.
And what's the average response when you tell somebody?
Most of the time, it's I didn't know.
Yeah.
Because sometimes people just don't know.
Yeah.
And kind of like what we talked about earlier is no one really cares about the water till it's not there.
Right.
That type
right,
of thing.
Right.
But there's some people that
Always
yeah,
aggravate. You're taking my right. Yeah.
yeah.
So tell me about y'all's. So obviously y'all have a little bit of an outreach program, right?
Yeah.
So you're trying to. How do y'all go about that? What do y'all?
Um,
Y'all have
so-
somebody assigned to that?
So it's kind of just it falls under the job description and other duties as assigned. So right now it is handled by 2 staff members, and so they just work together to do stuff for the district's website and for Facebook, things like that.
So mostly it's a social media
Yeah.
outreach. Do y'all
And,
do
and
any-
we do it on our back of our bills as well. So we have
Okay.
a place on the back of the bills where we'll put information related to water restrictions or water conservation.
So you guys statutorily have the right to fine people.
Yeah.
So that's good. Okay, I didn't know. But y'all don't have people that like go to the schools and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, no, and we do not. Not yet. That's part of our, because we're fairly new in the water conservation outreach thing, and so that's part of our plan for in the future is just to get more in front of the schools and the kids, and more community outreach. Kind of open up that band of influence and information just to let people know, because what we don't want to have happen is it come down to us having to go to stage 4 and there's no outdoor watering and all these other restrictions just to be able to provide water.
Right.
Because I think there's a way that people can back off on the watering.
Yep.
And help everybody.
Yeah, no doubt. I see people right now whose yards look like golf courses. I mean, they're just gorgeous, and I'm not faulting them. I just know that they've actually amped their watering up. They haven't slowed back any. And if you were watering 4 days a week, you go to 3. Your yard's not going to die.
No.
It's just not going to be quite as pretty, but it would save you 25% of the watering cost, or the amount of water that you're actually pumping.
And one of the things we did, I think it was the 3rd campaign that we did for water conservation, was talk about a moisture meter that we have, and they're free to our district customers, that they can actually put in the yard, and it'll let you know whether or not you need to water.
Yeah.
Because standing on top and looking at the grass, the grass lies. Like it'll take all the water you want to give it. So don't trust what the grass says.
Right.
Like check the moisture below that grass layer.
Yeah, I learned a hard lesson about the moisture meters. When I first moved back from California, I put in 3. I'm ashamed to say how much they cost, but about $8,000 or $9,000 palm trees. And I had no idea, how much water they needed or didn't need. So I basically killed all 3 of them, overwatering them. And the guy who came out was kind of laughing about it. Of course, he got to replace them. And he gave me a $3 or $5 moisture meter. And it had a probe on it about that long. He said, stick that in the ground. Yep. And he said, when the needle gets right here, don't put any water on them.
Yep.
And so it was an overwatering issue. It wasn't a...
Absolutely.
And so the moisture meters, they made a believer out of me. I grow bougainvilleas out on my deck and pentas, and I use the moisture meter because they hate wet feet. And it's easy in pots to give them... You can overwater all this stuff so easily. So I think the moisture meter idea is a great idea.
Yeah, it is. It really is.
Yeah. So we do. I know Lone Star does a drought buffer. So when the drought gets to stage, I think the 2nd stage, they give a 5% increase in pumpage. When it gets to the 3rd stage, which is where we were just recently, it goes to 10%. So you can pump 10% more water with no penalty. And then when we get where we are now, it automatically goes to 15%. Now, do you think that's a good thing to have that drought buffer, or do you think that that's a bad thing?
I think that is depending upon your source. So I think for me and for Porter Sud, part of our responsibility in the drought is to curb our water use.
Yeah.
And therefore not needing the buffer. And that's part of the stuff that we're going to be doing this winter is rethinking. We got punched in the face.
Right.
So it's time to rethink the plan and think about maybe sooner doing something and maybe tying some different ideas to what we think drought is. So maybe it's not necessarily, it's hot, because we're in South Texas. It's hot all summer.
All the time. Yep.
And maybe it's not necessarily tied just to it's hot and it hasn't rained, because we're in Texas and it's hot and it hasn't rained forever.
Right.
Maybe it's also tied to something that the demand is compared to our capacities, that if we hit 70% of our pumping capacity, then
you start turning the
you need to
switch.
back down, because we need to have a buffer there
Yeah.
for fires, water leaks, and things like that.
Boy, that sounds like a great idea. I wish everybody would think that way, because so there's two issues. One is the overpumpage issue, where it costs money, and it makes it hard to serve your customers economically.
Yeah.
And then the second one is you outstrip your capacity, period, and then something bad happens and you can't respond to it. And I think the second one is to me would be the more brutal one.
Yeah, and that's so during the month of August, we were pumping so hard on our system that, I mean, I was watching daily the trends of everything, just because the system.
So a bad fire at 6 a.m. would not be
when
you got peak usage.
Yeah, that would have been something that we could have handled. But if you were to lose one of your main transmission lines due to a leak, or one of the wells go down, like, hey, I'm tired and I'm going to give up.
Yeah, which
like,
can happen.
Then, I mean, that hurts things. That puts everything in a different perspective, and
that's
part of that planning that we've been doing over the last few years. That we're seeing now moving forward with all these different projects
starting to pay off,
interconnecting the plants and everything, so that we can move water across US 59 and stuff like that.
So y'all are almost a regional, right? So y'all have a big area.
We have a big area.
So you're not so you've got the little water provider who provides water for a neighborhood, right?
Yep.
So they have 500 customers here, they have 800 over there and 300 over here. They're not tied together. It's three separate systems.
Yeah.
Pretty simple.
Yeah.
Some of the same problems. They probably have fire mains in those neighborhoods, and
absolutely the same problems.
It just y'all have it on a bigger scale.
Yeah.
Now, so would you call yourselves a regional water supplier, or how would you?
Well, probably. You could probably define us as that, because we do serve over close to 20 square miles. And we've got a retail customers, about 6,500 retail connections. And we also supply water to 4 wholesales. And then we have an emergency interconnect as well. So we're providing water to not just Porter Sud and its retail and commercial customers, but to Valley Ranch.
Selling it to Valley Ranch and people like that.
Mud 84, Mud 24.
Is Valley
Woodridge.
Ranch pretty much dependent on Porter Sud for its water?
Yeah. Valley Ranch, and so that's on the south side of 99.
That's a big. They probably use quite a bit of water over there.
Yeah. So on the south side of 99 and west of 59, that section right there is all Porter Sud water. So we have multiple connections with them, because redundancy is important.
Right.
And that's part of what we plan in everything. Is if I need 2 pumps, then I'm definitely going to have 3 possibly ready for pump number 4.
Right.
Type thing. So we have multiple
you
connections.
Maintenance on these things. So when you have to shut one off, you
don't want that to be your only. And that's part of when we set a meter for a hospital or something like that, and we have to replace the meter. You don't want to shut the water off at the hospital, so that's why we have a bypass line that we can open up.
So, and y'all are all groundwater.
We're currently all groundwater.
100% groundwater, just like most of Montgomery County.
And we're all in all but one wells in the Evangeline. We've got one well in the Jasper that we're currently working on filtration treatment design for.
Yep.
So that'll be good to get that Jasper up and running.
Yeah. Going forward, do y'all plan to probably depend more on the Jasper than the Evangeline, or?
I think that's.
You're not going to get smaller.
Oh, no. We're not going to get smaller. And I think that's kind of what we're hoping with our partnership with Lone Star is, what is the data telling us on the Evangeline? Yeah, because, I mean, if it's one of those things where if we're unsure about the water in the Evangeline, and we're definitely sure that the Jasper has plenty of water, then we'll drill the Jasper.
Well, the spacing issue is totally different too. So Evangeline, Chico, treated as one, I think it's 2 feet for every gallon per minute. And then Jasper is 1.5 feet. So it gives you you can put more wells right now
Yeah.
in a smaller area with you don't run into the spacing problems. And then the Catahoula is 2 feet. So, 1 foot. So,
Yeah.
you can put a 600 gallon per minute Catahoula well over here, and 600 feet away put another one. Whereas in Evangeline, that's a 1,200 foot
Yeah.
space, which is quite a bit different. So, I think going forward, you're going to see more use of the alternative, what I call the alternative aquifers,
Yeah.
the ones that are they're a little more expensive to get to, but
Yeah.
and you're right. Once again, I'm not speaking as President Lone Star, but I will tell you that Lone Star really is trying to figure out, because we know going into the future we're not going to get use less groundwater. We're going to use more, and we need to know where we can get it and how much we can get, all of that. So we do really appreciate you guys going after it. What else could an agency like Lone Star do to help you guys?
I think one of the biggest helps that I've seen is just the stakeholder meetings and the opportunity for us to all come together and let's just talk about the issues, talk about what the issues are, what's currently happening, what do we think is going to happen, what do we need to actually verify what we think is going to happen. I think having those conversations, because
so 3 or 4 of those a year would be.
I think quarterly would be awesome.
Quarterly?
Yeah, because I think it's one of those where without that, it's kind of like what you're saying elsewise with the other smaller systems. Like everyone builds in a silo, and it's like, why do you want to do that? Like this is going to wind up being an issue. And one of the issues we have is the groundwater we see here isn't just impacted by what we do; it's impacted by what people south of us do as well.
Absolutely.
So even though we may be fantastic and diligent with our water resource, if the other people next to us aren't, then it's still going to be at the same problem.
They're in fairness, I guess, to Harris County, they pump almost three times the water that we do in Montgomery County, and yet they don't have a pumping cap, and they're charged with stopping subsidence at all costs without any limitations, basically. And the rumor is North Harris County has decided to delay their march to stop subsidence by 10 years. They've decided they're not going to convert any more to surface water for the next 10 years. Meaning they're going to be
more groundwater.
There's going to be more groundwater there. Yeah. So, and even though that's even getting further south, the Jasper's still usable in the northern parts of Harris County. Requires more treatment, but it's still usable. But the fact of the matter is, this part of the world is growing at a speed that's just unbelievable. And I heard a number thrown out the other day that by 2080 we're going to need 400,000 acre feet of water from wherever we get it. And right now we're probably, I would say, with surface water, which is very limited, and groundwater, I would be shocked if we're at 90,000 acre feet of water being pumped a year. I mean, water being used in Montgomery County right now. So when I think about going from 90 to 400,
that's huge.
That's a pretty big deal. And I think the water's there. I mean, I think the water can be made available. I don't think it's a matter of whether we will or won't get it. It's how do we do it, and how do we make it affordable?
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things too when you talk about affordability is we have to define what affordable means, because most people don't know the true value of water. Like they really don't. They complain about the water rate when it's $2.10 per 1,000 gallons, but they go buy Fiji water at the convenience store and pay $5 for a liter of water.
Yeah, no, I get it. I've never understood that.
Yeah.
And in some cases, the bottled water is not as pure as the water coming out of the tap, because you have no idea. Fiji water is probably very, very pure, very, but I drink this stuff, whatever that is. I drink X brand, and I suspect somebody's bottling it out of a tap somewhere, going through a filter, and and I try not to drink bottled water at all. You know, I like it right out of the tap. I want my chemicals, but I'm so shocked at the number of people that will not turn on a tap and get a glass of water out of the tap. They just will not do it.
And that's one of the things, like if you come to Porter Sud and want a glass of water, not a problem. You're getting a red Solo cup, ice, and tap water.
I love it.
And, you know, it's one of those things where, you know, people just, they have a fear of not knowing. And then with the internet, there's so much information available that you get information overload. And, you know, a lot of people don't like the fact that there's chlorine that we use to disinfect the water. And it's like, well, that's a lot better than dysentery and cholera and stuff like that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because when you look at, you know, the difference between the, you know, countries and everything, some of the deciding factors is simply potable water and sanitary sewer.
A lot of us have been fortunate enough to travel in our lives, and when you travel to some of these countries and you forget and brush your teeth right out of the faucet in some of these places, you pay a price for that.
Yeah.
Because that water is not, it's not good water, and they have parasites in it that our bodies aren't used to. So we take it for granted to some degree, but we also, I don't know how we got here, but you know, we have literally, I would say, a majority of people who will not drink a glass of water out of a tap. All you have to do is go to one of these H-E-B and Kroger. They have 2 aisles
of bottled
water.
Yeah.
And you know, I'm a little bit guilty. I have a really expensive, my wife has a really expensive coffee machine, and she uses distilled water in it because the filters are like $55, and if you use anything that hasn't been completely distilled, you change that filter about twice as often, and at $55 a filter, I'm kind of like, you can use distilled water in that, because I don't drink but 1 cup of coffee a day. But it is amazing to me, the way we think about water and don't realize the true value of it. When I moved back from California, I thought water was expensive in California. I was paying probably $175 a month. I lived on a postage stamp, and you know, we were forced by the city to put in landscaping that didn't drink a lot of water also. So, and I was still paying like $165 or $175 a month for water. And I moved into Magnolia in 2007, had my own well for my irrigation, and just had water. And the water bill was less than that. It was like, I don't know, $90 a month. And then I moved from that house into another house in 2013, and my wife came to me and said, our water bill is outrageous. We got a leak somewhere. So I'm out in the yard looking for a leak. And I said, well, how outrageous is it? She said, well, last month was $640 and this month $750. I said, yeah, that's a little bit outrageous. And so now, in fairness, I had a lot of landscaping and I had a lot of sprinklers on that lot. I had a swimming pool and, you know, had a teenage granddaughter who could, you know, use a lot of water. And, but anyway, I found out that the reason my water bill was so high was the GRP. It really wasn't supposed to be that high. Now, part of that was sewer, so I probably was paying $100 a month for sewer, but still, so I started looking at my water bill, and my water bill was high. I mean, it wasn't cheap, but the wholesale price of the water was like $2 and something back then. But I was paying the GRP fee, which was more than, and so that's the reason I got kind of involved in water. I said, how could this be? And then I realized that, you know, Montgomery County, even though it wasn't the right thing to do, was worried about water, and I found out what the cost of infrastructure was to build surface water and what it was going to cost people. And it's high. It's crazy
really
high. But I will tell you this, water is not going to get cheaper.
No.
And I think to your point, we've had it really cheap for a long time.
Yeah.
So I'm living in Willis in a we sponge off the Point Aquarius mud. So they furnish us with water, and so I pay a mud tax, and I don't remember, that's, I don't know, $1,000 or $1,100 a year, which equals out to about $100 a month. And my water bill's $41. So I went from paying $600 and $700 a month water bills to,
Yeah.
and the reason for it was Point Aquarius decided to drill a Catahoula well back when all this happened, so they wouldn't have to be in the GRP. It cost them a lot of money to drill the well, but now we have fairly cheap water, and you know, $141 a month for water. I'm not going to say that's cheap, but it's not expensive by any amount. And you know, when, like you said, when I think about that bottle right there in a convenience store is probably $2, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's expensive water right there. So it just I think people are going to have to come to a realization that we are going to have to pay. It's no longer going to be a commodity the way we've thought of it in the past, and we are going to have to pay more for it going into the future. But I don't think we have to pay an exorbitant amount for it either. I think $700 a month for the average family is a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay, Jonathan. Anything else that Porter Sud's doing to meet its needs in the future? Anything else that you can think of that?
I think the biggest thing that we're doing is so we've got an infrastructure fee that we charge our customers, and part of what that is.
Now, is that like an impact fee or?
No, it's separate. We do an impact fee for new development. So if someone comes in and
Wants
needs
to build
a tap,
a new neighborhood?
Yeah, they get charged impact fees so that it covers the cost of whatever it needs to be sure that they get the water that they need. The infrastructure fee is really related to making sure that we're addressing the issues with the aging infrastructure, because across the entire nation, you've got water lines that are bridges, 40, 50, 60 everything. Years old.
And there's been no set aside for that.
Yeah. And only in the last 4 years or so has the federal government actually started ponying up some money to help utilities meet this need.
And how big is that infrastructure fee? Is that a percentage or?
No, it's a flat fee. So
you charge X amount a month?
Yeah, per 1,000 gallons. So it's $3.50 per 1,000 gallons.
That's a great idea.
And so it allows us to go in and like we're going to have to rehab one of the wells this winter that was a really good workhorse during this past summer. And so the infrastructure fee helps to pay to put in new motor, new pump, get the well screens cleaned and inspected to make sure everything's good to go.
Pull it out and put it back.
So that when next summer hits and, you
got plenty of water.
That well's back online and should be good to go.
So do you guys interact with anybody regularly to share best practices? How do y'all?
Not really.
Because you guys do some really cool stuff. And I know there are other people doing, like H&W.
Mm-hmm.
They seem to be doing some pretty cool. They've been very responsible with their drought planning and all that also. Is there any local group in Montgomery County that gets together and shares?
Not that I'm aware of, but I think it's an excellent idea. I mean, because it's one of those where if you've gone through something and you can share some insight into that and share that with me, then I can learn from you, so I don't have to learn on my own when I go through it.
So let's take drought contingency planning, for example. How did y'all go about? Is there a guideline somewhere for that? Or did y'all just have to make it up?
So the drought contingency plan was already in place whenever I started with the district.
Okay.
And so it was something that was required as part of the water conservation plan through the Texas Water Development Board.
But did they give y'all that plan, or did they just?
I think they may have a template. I don't know, because the plan was already in place, so I didn't have to go back to the grassroots and figure out and actually write the plan. I'm just going to update and revise the plan.
Right. And do you have to report that plan to anybody?
Yes.
Who do you report it to?
Texas Water Development Board. So every year I actually have to give them a water conservation report on, did I do any outreach? How much water do I think I saved through the outreach? That type of thing. and it shows, this is what your water conservation plan was hoping to
Projected
accomplish, and this is what you actually did.
So how does the TECQ get involved? Are they involved in the water drought stuff? I know that's where we get our information. That's where the Lone Star gets their information from.
So not really. When it comes to the drought, we don't really hear from TCQ on that side of things.
And y'all don't report anything to them?
We do regulatorily, yep. So they're pretty much the governing entity for Porter Sud.
Okay.
Yeah. So they really do all of the water-related things, like our testing. When we do our lead and copper sampling. Whenever we're looking to drill a new well, we have to submit that package to TCQ for approval before we do it. Modifications we're doing at another plant, we actually have to.
And they assure you can meet demand also, right?
Yeah.
Don't they have something to do with that?
Yes, they do, because they look at. So one of the things TCQ has done recently in the last couple of years is actually come out with some guidance on what is a connection. So historically, if you look at a Walmart and look at a single family home,
totally different
usage, but according to TCQ, they were both
connections.
One connection.
Yep.
That has now changed some in the aspect of multi-units. So if you have an apartment complex that has 300 units and you get fed with an 8-inch meter, previously that would have been one connection, and we would have gone off of the 8-inch meter capacity to figure out our water capacity and storage requirements.
Yeah.
But now, because it's 300 units, TCQ says that's 300 connections. So what I have to do now is take that 300 connections back to the water plant and make sure I've got enough capacity in the well,
and they
storage,
require you
pumps,
to have 0.6 of
gallons per minute per connection.
Per connection.
Yep.
Available all the time.
And so that went from only having to need 0.6 at one connection to now I need 300 times 0.6,
which is 175 or something like that.
So it definitely changed it, and so that's one of the things that we wind up actually revising our impact fees to reflect that change as well. Yeah,
that's smart. So maybe Lone Star could play a role in maybe developing some sort of networking,
some type of coalition or something like that. Yeah,
something like that. I know that I know they have a new education fella, and they also do a lot of outreach to the schools.
They do.
And all that other stuff.
They do, because that would be beneficial for us, because we haven't done the outreach to the schools. So I would love to sit down with whoever's over that program and talk about best practices.
Yeah.
Like, hey, here's how you do this. This is how you get started. Here's the best bang for your buck.
Well, it certainly sounds like it might not be a bad idea to get some of the bigger entities like Porter Sud and HMW and some of these others to join together to increase the outreach, maybe. Because I know Lone Star has the vehicle. They've got the big old trailer with the lab and, for the schools, and they furnish all the kits to the teachers and teach them how to use it and do all that other stuff.
Yeah.
And, it seems to me like, if there were more people involved in that, you could really increase. That's a great idea. I'll take that back over there and
I think
talk
so.
a little bit about it.
I think it's one of those things. Instead of us all running around in different directions, if we can all start walking to the same beat of the drum and everything, I think it's going to be easier on us all, because, like I said earlier, if Porter Sud does everything it can to conserve water, but then an entity next to us doesn't,
makes it really difficult.
It kind of washes out everything that we've been through.
Totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree. All right, Jonathan, listen, you don't know how much I appreciate you coming on
no problem.
and spending some time talking to me about it. You're very knowledgeable, and once again, Porter Sud, in my eye, does a really good job of this kind of stuff, and the fact that y'all are looking into the future strategically gives me a lot of...
No, and it's all due to, the board and the staff that we have.
And y'all by the way, y'all have a great board.
Yeah.
I send, please, my regards to them. They've been nothing but helpful, and I know there were fits and starts in the early days. I hope that's all behind us, but I do love the idea of people who are willing to step up and let's try to figure this out
Yeah.
together and work together.
Yeah, and it's one of those you can either stand on the sideline and complain about what's going on, or you can
roll
try
up your
to
sleeves and
be part of the solution.
You bet.
And we
Jump
want
in
to be we want to be part of the
yeah,
solution.
let's all mud wrestle. If we're gonna have mud wrestling, let's all do it together. Well, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And
Appreciate
to the citizens of Montgomery County, I enjoyed it.